Hey, good afternoon. It's always a pleasure to be here with you. And today we are talking about coronavirus, not the COVID, but the coronavirus. And for this, I have a very, very special person here. That is Dr. Jenny Cook. Thank you so much for being with us today, Dr. Jenny Cook. Thank you.
Pleasure. Thank you for inviting
For,
me.
for me, it's a pleasure to have her here. Everybody that knows her experience, how important she have been during all the development of vaccines for bronchitis virus in chickens. And I invite all of you that are listening to us today, if you have any questions, just put these questions and I will ask her. So, Dr. Jenny, can you just tell a little bit, because I think it's a long time, but just a little bit about your experience, how you have been with coronavirus in your life, how this happens, and everything.
Okay, well, as you probably know, I worked on infectious bronchitis for many, many years, purely by chance, really. Initially, I worked at Houghton Poultry Research Station, which some of your listeners may have heard of. I was there for many years, and then when that institute closed, I went to work for Intervet, as it then was, which after many different names eventually became part of MSD. Um, and latterly, I was working very much on vaccines. I got really into that when I joined MSD, but it was becoming an issue before that, because as you know, IB virus exists in the form of many different variants, and there was a lot of concern about how these might be controlled. So that was really the interest I had in the last few years was trying to develop a vaccination program which didn't require a new IV vaccine for each variant, but could give a much broader spread of protection. So that's it really.
That is so. We have this bronchitis. I also have some questions here that they sent to us before, talking that this bronchitis virus is still a very important disease in field, but we are controlling it with vaccine, right? And you are one of the that help us in that. Can
Mhm.
you talk a little bit about the development of this vaccine, about the different strains and the strategies that you use to control this disease and in chickens?
Chickens, okay. Well, um, unlike, for example, Newcastle disease, you cannot protect chickens against infectious bronchitis using killed or inactivated vaccines. They're part of the whole picture as far as breeders and layers are concerned. But for broilers and for initial vaccination of future breeders and layers, it's essential to use a live attenuated vaccine. And that, of course, causes many big problems because you have to attenuate the virulence of this virus. And this is normally done by passaging many times in embryonated eggs. So it takes a long time. Just to give you an example, the H120 vaccine had 120 passages in eggs, and that's a pretty mild vaccine. I don't think it's used at all now, but at one time there was a vaccine called H52, which only had 52 passages, so it was not as mild as H120, but it was used as a second or a third vaccination. So that gives you some idea of how many passages you might need, and therefore the time it takes, and of course the expense. And at the end of the day, you can't be sure until you actually start using it whether it works or not. Point of attenuation is to develop a vaccine which is mild enough that it's not causing disease, but it still has to be able to replicate in the chicken if it's going to stimulate immunity. So it's a fine balance between over attenuation and under attenuation. And if it's too hot, not attenuated enough, then it's potentially capable of causing some disease. And it's particularly an issue if management is not good. If you have ammonia in the house, for example, a very dusty shed, the irritation that those environmental factors cause to the respiratory tract can allow the IB virus vaccine to enter, replicate, and cause some disease. And of course, combined with other pathogens, influenza Newcastle, that makes the situation worse. So it's a long, difficult process to develop a vaccine. And you just hope at the end of the day, it's going to be an effective vaccine, that the problem that you are trying to control is still there. Otherwise, it's very difficult to decide which IB vaccines to choose to develop a vaccine, because IB variants appear. Many of them have gone within 6, 12 months, 2 years. It's only a few that persist for longer than that. And if you don't have one that persists for longer than that, then your vaccine's probably not worthwhile. So it's a very difficult balance. And this is one of the reasons why we tried to find a broad protection program, which meant that we didn't need to consider making a new IB vaccine for each variant. I think there's many reasons for that. I've just gone through the process of developing a vaccine. But a lot of authorities, quite rightly, I think, are very reluctant to introduce new live attenuated IB vaccines into a country because of the risk that they're introducing a virus that's not already there. So it's a very difficult situation.
Yes, I have questions here about biosecurity, right? Because in chickens and poultry productions, we use the vaccine. You already told us that we have to have attenuations because the vaccine should be alive to make a response, but they should be attenuated enough to don't cause disease, but not so attenuated that the immunity will not be um, enough to defend this. So I know that when you vaccinate a flock, like if I vaccinate a flock here, and I have another flocks around me that have not been vaccinated, this vaccine strains could go and jump to another flocks. Can you tell us a little bit about this, like the risk of a vaccinated flock and this vaccine strains to jump in the environment?
I think that there's two points here. One, because of this is one of the main reasons that certainly in many parts of Europe, and I don't know if Canada's the same, the first IB vaccine is normally now given in the hatchery, so that by the time the birds arrive, the chicks arrive on the farm, they have already been vaccinated. So that would minimize the problem you're mentioning. But that apart, biosecurity is an absolutely vital part of IB control. It's essential that you have strict biosecurity, certainly between farms and ideally between sheds on the same farm, so that you control everybody who goes in and out of that shed. You control all the delivery vehicles, the people who are the vaccination teams, the catching teams, and you control good biosecurity in the hatchery, in the packing station. At every stage of the process, it's vital that high levels of biosecurity are enforced throughout the shed and the farm.
Yes, when you learn about this biosecurity, like I think this is a could be a point that we can learn a little bit. I remember that you have a meeting in the avian pathology journal. I was my first meeting in the jitters, and I remember that you said when I met you said that we have been the papers that talk about coronavirus have been a lot of review after this coronavirus starts, especially about the survivability of the virus in the environment, and also about biosecurity. Can you teach us your experience to the biosecurity measures that is really, really important for coronavirus, and that you can use it as also in the case of humans today?
But biosecurity is not just for bronchitis, but for influenza, for Newcastle, for everything. Try and keep out every pathogen. So, the perfect situation would be to make everybody change and shower in and out of each shed. If you're not going to do that, then certainly protective clothing, different boots for each shed, hand covering, masks probably, and take good account of the wheels of the lorries which come onto the farm. So that's an important point. And there was a lot of work done when EDS first appeared, egg drop syndrome, showing how easy it was to transmit that on the egg trays and on the surface of eggs. So you have to think very carefully about every aspect of moving things onto the farm, between sheds on the farm and off the farm as well.
So really in between today, do you think that the diagnostic it's an important aspect to start a plan of control? Because in chickens, for example, we can have a diagnostic of birds that are positive, and then we can isolate for some pathogens. Do you think that this is could something that like companies, cities, or even states can do? Like you have more diagnostic, and then once you have a positive people, we can really go to isolation of these people and start to reduce the transmissions by it.
You're thinking of humans now, of
Yeah,
the
talk
human
about you.
coronavirus. Yes, I think testing is vital, and that's something which I don't think enough is being done. I mean, not only swab testing, but also antibody serology. I think there should be much more of that being done. And of course, at the
Yeah.
moment, it is beginning to increase. More testing is being done, and so more positives are being found. So the incidence is increasing, but part of that, I think, is because of increased testing. But testing is certainly vital.
Okay. So do you think that, for example, with the time, the coronavirus will become less virulent in humans? I mean, with your experience in poultry, do you think that with the time that the populations will have more contact, we can have more a virus less virulent than at the beginning?
Difficult to say. It's really touching on the question of herd immunity, isn't it? And how important that is. But I think until there's a vaccine, then we really are in a difficult situation. Once there's a vaccine, and if it's widely used, and if it does induce immunity, there's lots of ifs here, of course, we don't know yet. It's going to be some many months before the vaccine's ready to use. It's used in a high proportion of the population. Hopefully immunity develops, and then that should dampen down the virus, assuming that the virus itself doesn't change and mutate in the meantime. At the moment, as far as I can see, there is no evidence that it is mutating. As you know, with IB, there are many different variants. I'm not aware that there's any that are any different types of SARS-2 which are causing problems.
Yes, there is one question here is exactly about this, because in poultry we know that we have different variants of coronavirus for bronchitis, and they say also that sometimes you need to think about to have different vaccines to have perfect protections against these different variants. So in do you think that for the human coronavirus, we're gonna have the same situations, like you're gonna start to have variants, and then we need to think about a vaccine for each regions or even for each country. I don't know.
At the moment, there's no evidence. I think the important thing at the moment is to find a vaccine, or hopefully
What?
several vaccines that actually work. And it's too early to know about that yet. There are many different vaccines on the trial, of course, and many different types, different approaches being used. And I think we probably need more than one different one. I think we may need perhaps a vaccine to give the first vaccination and then a booster vaccine, maybe with a different type. So I think we're some way off needing to think about developing different vaccines, and that's always a difficult route to go down. Even with the chicken, it's something that you don't undertake lightly. I don't know of any evidence at the moment that the SARS-2 virus is a different type in different regions of the world. And it's possible, but I haven't seen that data.
And about when you talk about this variation, there is another question asking, for example, if this coronavirus from humans could variate and adapt it to the animals in the future, like you have some. Do you think that this is going to be possible or not?
I think it's highly, highly unlikely. I don't think you can
Mhm.
say never, but it's most
Yeah,
unlikely.
this is like
SARS, the human coronavirus is, well, let's wind back a step. There are four, I think, different groups of coronaviruses: alpha, beta, gamma, delta. And infectious bronchitis is gamma, as a gamma coronavirus. And the SARS-2 virus is a beta. And they are very different. Although they're both coronaviruses, they are very different. And there is absolutely no evidence of any cross between them. So I don't think there's any. I mean, people sometimes say, will the COVID SARS-2 virus infect my chickens? I think the answer to that is no.
so. This is very important coming from this for the Dr. Jenny Cook. I think it's avoid people start to talking that the virus from humans go to chickens or chickens from humans, because they
Yeah.
confuse a lot about influenza, right?
Yes,
But in
yes,
this
it's
case,
different. Mm,
she's saying that it's different. This is really
mm,
nice. So take care, you guys, when you are
yes.
listening to the field, and please pay attention what she's saying it. Here another questions that we have from the people that sent to me before. Let's see. They are ask us about biosecurity again. There
Mhm,
is many questions about biosecurity.
mhm. And
I don't know if you have something special about biosecurity to address for people that are asking, like the biosecurity improvement will probably be more the most important message. And
mhm,
again, they are asking why what we can learn from the chicken size that we can apply for humans.
mm. I think there's an awful lot that the human people can learn from infectious bronchitis. And we know that infectious bronchitis is spread not only from the respiratory tract, but also in the feces. And maybe that's something that should be noted as far as the human work is concerned, that fecal spread may be important with the human coronavirus as well. Which is why when it comes to biosecurity, you've got to remember that it's shed in the feces, so it's easy to tramp it around on boots, and it will be, the aerosol will spread quite a long way, so the whole of the interior of the house could be infected. So
There
that's something to bear in mind.
Yeah, this is points that you mentioned is interesting, because unfortunately we're gonna do, for everybody that is listening to us, we're gonna do a webinar with more research about coronavirus. But
Mm-hmm.
unfortunately, Dr. Jenny Cook was not able to stay in this
Yeah.
debate, and
Mm,
she's here her time,
mm,
especially for us. What I think is really great, because then I have more time with you. But one of the research that I invited for these discussions was a medical at the Texas medical hospital. and she was dealing with coronavirus and microbiota. So this doctor, she was doing some trials, like clinical trials, relating that what's changing microbiota when you have this coronavirus. And you mentioned about this here. So how do you think that microbiota could, or could be really something that could improve the reactions of human beings for coronavirus?
Yeah, haven't really thought about that. Not sure. I'm not sure that it could. My first thought is probably it's not really a useful route to go down, but maybe it's a pity you're other speaker and I can't be here at the same time. Sorry about that, but just
Yeah,
didn't
that's
work
okay.
out.
Another questions that I can have in the same area, it was like when you talk about the coronavirus and bronchitis, during the time that you are developing these different vaccines to control the coronavirus, did you see that there is any nutritional influence that helps these vaccines to respond better or not in your experience?
No, never saw that at all. No, we were more concerned about trying to find a program using the smallest number possible of live attenuated vaccines to broaden the protection against many different variants, because variants arise just as a result of a very small number of changes on the virus particle. So most of the virus hasn't changed. And this was the starting point. We thought, well, if most of the virus is the same, maybe just two very different live attenuated vaccines in the program would be effective. And indeed, that proved to be the case against not every variant, but certainly the majority. So as far as the human situation is concerned, maybe two different types of vaccine would be really good, in
Yes,
humans.
we observe here some studies that I did that we saw more uniformity and high titles of bronchitis vaccine
Mm.
when you use different programs in feed, but
Mm.
we can talk it in another way. One question that I have is like, if you say to me that we need to attenuate the virus in order to reduce the effect of vaccine, the reactions of vaccine, because the vaccine of coronavirus, the bronchitis vaccine, they give a huge reaction sometimes in the animals, right? They cause lesions in the trachea, and we need to be careful in this, right?
But they shouldn't. In an ideal world, they shouldn't cause any damage. That suggests to me that maybe there are some other factors. Maybe the management isn't good, so the house is full of dust or ammonia, or maybe there's another pathogen present which has already caused some damage to the epithelium of the respiratory tract. Because IB virus, when you vaccinate or inoculate or infect a chicken, the virus replicates in the lining of the trachea, the nasal tissue, the upper respiratory tract. So if that is being stressed in any way by dust, ammonia, even if the chick quality is poor, nutrition is another factor in that respect, then the vaccine may cause a severe reaction, but it shouldn't if management and everything else, disease control is good.
So when we think about the coronavirus in human now,
Yeah.
they are developing the vaccine. Are you take the shot of vaccine against coronavirus? Are you be one in the first line waiting for it, or are you waiting up to somebody to do it?
I'm certainly thinking very seriously about being one of the first to have it, but I want to read a little bit more about the work that's been done. And there's been some talk of side reactions recently. I'd like to see more of that, but I think probably yes, I would like to have the vaccine. Because
And
none of it is always possible. I've been infected already and don't know because I haven't been tested. That maybe I have antibodies already, who knows? But yes, I think I would want to take the vaccine. Would you?
yes, I am.
Yeah.
I for sure will be
Mm.
in the line
Yeah.
to take a vaccine, especially to serve as a how can I say experimental unit.
Yes. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, they don't care to be experimental unit sometimes. So another questions in this area is like if you have a vaccine, do you think that we have a reactions like regular reactions when we start with bronchitis vaccine and you have these lesions and in the epithelium of trachea? Do you think you can expect the strong reactions from the coronavirus vaccine in human as well?
Well, I don't know if I'm not sure that any of the ones under development are live attenuated vaccines, as we've talked about with bronchitis. I think most of the ones are either RNA vaccines, DNA, or they use a vector. So
Sure, right?
they shouldn't cause disease. I don't think, but maybe I'm wrong. I don't think anyone is attenuating the SARS-2 virus by conventional methods.
So the technology of developing the vaccine is something that really will help us to have a more safety vaccine,
Yeah,
not spread and not cause a reaction, right? This is what.
absolutely. But will they be effective? We're just waiting to see that at the moment, aren't we?
Yes, I think everybody is looking for
Mm.
this
Yes,
effectiveness
yes.
of the vaccine and coronavirus. So we are going to the end of our conversation today. And one thing that I would like to ask you is there is what a message what your overview of as a specialist in coronavirus and poultry as what is your overview about this pandemic situation? Is really a situation for pandemic? Do you think that we need really to take care as people are so worried about?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a really serious situation. It's so unexpected that there was an original SARS virus and there was the MERS, Middle Eastern respiratory virus. They were much more restricted and short-lived. This seems to have the ability to be a global problem, and we're worried about it in Canada, in Europe, that many parts of the world, well, Brazil, for example, poor parts of Africa, it's a much more serious problem there because of all the other underlying issues there. So I think globally it's a very serious situation and it's not going to go away anytime soon. I think we just hope for several effective vaccines that can be used widely and at least if not totally eliminate the disease, um, moderate its effects, as is the case, of course, with many other vaccines. And eventually, maybe it can then be eradicated, but we're a long way off that.
What do you think about these drugs that people say that work for coronavirus, like ivermectin and this kind of things that people are saying that works against COVID? As a specialist in coronavirus and poultry, how do you feel? Is possible that we have these drugs could have some effect?
Well, some of them certainly seem to be um, reducing the more serious effects. Certainly in this country, anyway, people who are in intensive care and really, really ill. Some of the drugs that are being tried do seem to be reducing the more serious side effects of the initial infection. It's very strange because some people apparently have no symptoms at all. For some, it's just an unpleasant respiratory infection. But for a lot of people, it's a really, really serious issue, which apparently continues to be a problem for months afterwards. So I think any drug which can help reduce the more serious effects is good.
And what's your final message about this coronavirus situation? What you are doing personally to take care of yourself and your family, and what is your message for all of us?
For us, not for the chicken. For the chicken, biosecurity, and good, careful vaccination. For us, personal hygiene, avoiding close contact, plenty of fresh air, try and keep healthy.
Yeah, this point of fresh air is very interesting because when you saw some countries like US, they are always indoor. We, for example, I come from Brazil, so of course that all the time that I can, I open the door even if it's cold because I like the air. And do you think that this is a condition to increase the transmissions when people are indoor, when they close, when they don't have this wind coming
Well,
in the house?
it's true of most infections, isn't it? In enclosed space, a lot of people close together, no air circulation. The infections spread much more readily. Now, out in the open, the infections are much less likely to be transmitted. So I think distance is important too. Keep your distance from other people.
For
No
example,
parties.
for bronchitis virus, I know that the virus could go far away in a very short time, right?
Mm-hmm.
Kilometers, you can have this. Um, do you think the same happens with the coronavirus humans that they could?
I think so. Traditionally, coronaviruses are highly infectious, as a general rule. And I think it can spread, the airborne spread could be quite a distance. We don't, of course, know whether the human coronavirus is spread on people's clothes, on their shoes, but it's quite likely. Quite likely.
So we have here just a comment from Emily Fontaine. Thank you for staying with us, Emily. She say exactly what the government of Canada say. The French government say that we need to open the windows. Let the windows open and have a fresh air.
Not so good
So
in the winter.
exactly. So this is biosecurity and waiting for the vaccine. This is what we are doing today, right, Dr.
Yeah,
Cookie?
that's right. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you for all the good conversation here. And I thank you everybody that stay at home. I have very good people here, very good friends. Thank you so much for you to have us this week. And next week, we're going to talk a little bit about ruminants. And after, we're going to talk about coronavirus again. And we're going to have coronavirus. Unfortunately, Dr. Jenny Cook was not available for this day, but we have a professor from the University of University of Cornell that you're going to talk about coronavirus and swine. We're going to have this doctor in human side that you're going to talk about how microbiome, how is the idea of microbiota affecting the coronavirus patients and what she's working on in terms of additives that could help in it. And you're going to have also a field doctor that work a lot in field controlling coronavirus with vaccine, Dr. Mario Sergio. So we're going to have a good talking here about coronavirus, and I hope to have all you here again. Thank you, Dr. Jenny Cook. Have a
Thank
good
you for
night.
inviting me. Good night. Good night.
Everybody, thank you so much. See you next week. Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye.